The door opened a full minute before she walked inside. Del Garbo could picture her standing opposite the frosted and dark-tinted glass, her shoulders arched, her neck bent down, deep, screwing breaths of courage. She didn't look like she belonged there, and she knew it, which made her nervous, flighty. God knows how she found the office. A whispered scent in the ladies' room, perhaps, or the bribing of some local teenage hood rat. Her fingers worried over the painted but not really gold on the handle of her pocketbook. She likely took one last glance behind her, into the hot, sticky night air that threatened rain like always, before turning to face the choice that she had already made when she left her house that evening. The door was open. All she had to do was walk inside. "Well, it's a good thing I don't have a cat," Garbo said, a cigarette dangling between his teeth. "But I do have an air conditioner, so could you get that behind you?" "I'm sorry," she said, quickly turning. She was wearing a dark green dress that was just short enough to flare enticingly upwards as she whirled around and closed the frosted glass door. Garbo raised his left eyebrow. "Well," he said, leaning back into the short leather desk chair and placing one foot up on the edge of the table, "you don't look like you know your way around a Tuesday evening here." "Is it obvious?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What is that smell, anyway?" "Paper mill." Garbo gestured with his thumb out the window. "Two, actually. And there's a sugar refinery plant back there in the mess of it all, too." He stubbed his cigarette out on the simple glass ashtray on the desk beside him. "When the ports were first built, there was paper headlines that called it Smell of Success." "It's horrid." Garbo nodded. "Well, the rent's cheap and there's no real window shoppers. I like it quiet." He paused and then reached inside the breast pocket of his button-up and removed a silver cigarette case. He opened it and offered one, which the woman took and pressed softly between her colorless lips. He replaced the case and returned to the relaxed position in his chair. "There's a basket full of matchbooks on the end table by the door, provided by the Johnson and Rector law offices of Savannah. They do civil suits, divorces, custody." Garbo trailed off and waved his right hand around in a non-committal gesture. "My reference will give you 5% off and me 5% of your case, so that's who I'd recommend." The woman looked at the basket briefly and then took the cigarette out of her mouth. "Oh, no, you don't Garbo cut her off. "I don't understand, I know. I don't understand how when he left, he took the only necklace your grandmother left the family. I don't understand your angry ex-boyfriend who don't stop calling, and I couldn't possibly understand your daughter has been missing for at least 3 days, but the police think it's not worth their time because she's just some scrubby teen, alright?" He played with the silver case again and removed the cigarette for himself, lighting it with a small, pocket-sized butane torch he produced from his left pocket. "I don't understand the way he comes home later than he used to, smelling faintly of some other woman's perfume. I don't understand how you don't know how those dents ended up on your car, and how you just needed the money. And I never, ever, ever will be able to understand the depths that you had to sink in order to forget to put your face on when you left your house this evening so you wouldn't be recognized by any of your friends from the book club on your way here." The woman stayed still for a moment after Del Garbo stopped speaking. She had been letting him ramble, he noticed with some amusement, probably on purpose, and it was clear that she hadn't heard any of it. When she spoke again, and it was at length, Garbo could make out the faintest traces of an accent in her syllables. Italian, perhaps, or European Spanish. Not American Spanish, of which he himself was 1/4, in addition to the Greek and Germanic blood that flowed around inside him. Her voice was not rushed, but it did not lack urgency, and she enunciated syllables with the precision of a schoolteacher. "Mr. Garbo, I'm sure we could fill an encyclopedia with the things that you don't know. And, if you thought you could make money off of it, I'm also sure that you have already done so, in which case if I ever again became interested in the plethora of information that you are lacking, I could simply pick one up in the bargain section and peruse it at my leisure." She leaned forward and placed the cigarette back into her mouth. Garbo matched her movements, the mini-torch already in his hand, and she exhaled heavily into the stale air of his office. "You got a tongue. Is there a name behind it?" She met his eyes and held them like eggs in a vice grip for the briefest of moments before looking away and moving subconsciously towards the window. When the woman smoked, she took deep, long drags that caused the paper at the ends of her cigarette to hiss and peel away, revealing the cherry-red lipstick of ember underneath. "Mickey Valence told me to get in contact with you. Del Garbo Charters. Is that a cover, or do you really take people fishing out here?" "Well, this here's the land part," Garbo said, ignoring the name drop. "But we do have 2 boats out on Wilmington. Why, you looking to catch some cobias? You don't seem to angle it, despite the, angles." "I've also spoken with Derek Kickblighter," the woman continued, ignoring him. "He spoke very highly of you. Said to tell you that you were spot on with the bit about the papers, and that you know what that means." Del Garbo said nothing in response, but his mind was now engaged. She had done her research, it seemed, but for what purpose? Again came the waggle of the left eyebrow. She continued. At any rate, here you are. From what I heard, I was expecting something of a larger office. I understand, though. I also understand the purpose of putting up a false facade. She turned to ash her cigarette in the brass scales sitting near the window, and it was then, with her face half obscured in darkness, that Del Garbo made the connection. Vivian Spateo! He felt immediately foolish, blinking at the face he had seen hundreds, maybe thousands of times over the past few years. His brain spun and landed on the justification that it was just one of those things, like not being able to see the nose in front of your face. He did his best to dismiss it from the shame of his mind. Vivian let out a short, harsh laugh. Oh, yes, you're quite the detective, aren't you? Recognizing a face off a billboard. Perhaps I've made poor judgment in coming here. Not just billboard anymore, from what I heard on the news. You've landed a big movie gig. Savannah's own star of the silver screen, you are. Garbo had removed his feet from the desk and was now sitting somewhat straighter in the chair. Must be exciting, all that Hollywood come to town. All that new money. Oh, so we have stumbled onto something you know. I hoped we would get there eventually. Vivian turned and for the first time seemed to fully take in the man sitting at the desk, darting over and around him with her eyes. Del Garbo was average-sized, maybe even a little on the thin side, with muscles that he knew existed but rarely trained in any other sense other than practical. At the moment, he was sporting shoulder-length, swept-back brown hair and a thick brown mustache over 3 or 4 days of stubble. There were empty beer bottles on the table behind his desk and at least a dozen spent cigarette butts in the ashtray. He had a noticeable crescent-shaped scar on the right side of his chin, equidistant from his jaw and his earlobe, especially visible through the stubble. His hands were somewhat large, but his wrists seemed slightly feminine, as if they were too small for his body, and when he gestured with them it gave his hands an almost animated quality. He was wearing a white-collared shirt, a button-up, what seemed to be dark blue or black jeans underneath the desk. There were small bags underneath his eyes, but they did not give off the air of an exhaustion. Overall, he gave off an appearance of weary, but generally good-natured. There was nothing of the hardness that Vivian had expected. Of the arrogance, of course, but she encountered arrogance in every corner of her life. Men themselves were the ultimate arrogance, going so far as to create a god and then tell themselves that he had appointed them as leaders of humanity. She pushed these thoughts from her mind and focused on what lay in front of her. To Del Garbo, she asked, Why did Mickey Valence need $80,000 anyway? I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Why, are you looking for a handout? Look around here, Miss Spateo, and I'm sure you can clearly see that if anyone should be asking people for money, it'd be the other way around. She was testing him, and he knew it. Garbo said, It's later than you look here. Why don't you cut the exam short and tell me why you came all the way down to the ports when you should just be reading lines or doing a press kit? Or maybe that's the other way around. Vivian seemed to come to some kind of decision in her head. She leaned forward, resting a palm on the stained wood, and stubbed her cigarette out in the glass ashtray, her arm brushing up against Garbo's own bare skin as he did so. He could smell her, a mix of jasmine and cucumber, sharp against his own cigarette-stained aura. When she withdrew, she kept her palm on the table a few brief moments longer than was necessary, inviting him to look up her arms and into the curve of her breasts before continuing up and meeting her eyes. Del Garbo had to concede to himself that she really was quite pretty, so when she raised her finger and said, "One more," in a tone that felt almost condescending, he was inclined to let it slide. For the moment, anyway, he was happy to watch her talk. She asked him, "Do you remember the name of the movie that I'll be starring in?" Garbo squinted. He rarely paid attention to advertisements, often choosing to turn the radio off entirely when they came on. Vaguely, in the back recesses of his mind, he could picture the black and white news broadcast he had viewed from the end of a bar days earlier. It was something long and irritatingly teasing, as if just by hearing the words of the title alone would be enough to draw your attention away from anything and everything else. The Marshland Mystery. The true Savannah riverboat casino robbery story? Is that it? Oh, look there, Vivian said. That's 2 things you know. The third I'll give you for free. I'm going to rob that casino. For real. She crossed her arms. Do you want to help me?
Del Garbo
help the beautiful movie star carry out her dastardly plan? Or will he turn her into the police? Find out next time on Marshland Mysteries, the true story of the Savannah Riverboat Casino robbery. Marshland Mysteries, copyright 2018 by Filthy and Free Publishing, written by Christopher J. Touton.